Hey everybody, this was going to be a Luddite rant, but it's actually a little bit more complicated than that. And rather than split it into two videos, I'm going to do one long one. Yay! All right, well, here we go. So I'm going to try to do this all in one take. Okay, so much for that. On April 14th this year, I was cruising through the Japan Times looking for more stuff about the STAP stuff and the Riken and the Obokata Sensei and all this stuff, and I came across this little gem right here. This is an article written by a gentleman named Sawa Takamitsu, and he is the president of Shiga University. So please sit back and enjoy while I shoot my career in the foot. So I will say this at the beginning and I will say this at the end. Dear President Sawa, if you would like to come on camera and do a little interview, I would love to talk to you about this idea and some of the other articles that you've written. And seriously, don't be shy about it, because I think that there are a lot of things we do agree on, just nothing in here. The article is entitled Internet Increases Misconduct Risk and can still be found on the Japan Times opinion page article. It should be pretty easy to find. If it's not there, I'll try to get an archive version up down in the links below. But while I'm at it, Japan Times, quit limiting the number of articles that I can read on your site. It's really annoying, and I'm not going to give you any money, and I'm not going to log in. Just saying. I'm not going to go through the article sentence by sentence, although it might seem like it. Remember, this is an opinion article that was published freely out into the world, and so I am merely addressing it. I'm not attacking the man. I am going to challenge what he purposely put out into the world, but not in the first sentence. The first sentence is, the ever-growing use of computers and the internet has drastically changed the ways in which academic and scientific research projects are conducted. Kind of goes without saying, but all right. And the second sentence is also pretty decent. Internet has made it much easier to collect information, blah, 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 preparing theses, and computers can rely on computers to process computer images and sentences. Again, not a real stretch, although he starts to go off the edge here with, so they now spend most of their time with their eyes glued to computer screens. I smell technophobia. Although computers have greatly contributed to making research work far more efficient than in the past, there's no denying that they have saddled researchers with the possibility of more misconduct. Now, the last half of that was paraphrased, but that's pretty much what it says. Yes, just like every other tool, including books, the computers make it easier to steal other people's research. However, the internet, being a tool, also has ways to check research for plagiarism and other nasty little surprises. So he goes on to talk a little bit about the Riken investigation and the papers and all of this, and all of these acts of misconduct were presumably, due to the use of computers in the course of writing papers and the use of the internet in searching related literature. That doesn't necessarily mean that you will commit misconduct because you use the internet for research. Actually, I would put forward, currently, if you don't use the internet for research, you're not doing anything useful in the field of research. Doesn't matter what the field is. So here's where the logic really starts to get bad. There must be a large number of copy and paste cases in writing papers. Must there be? Why must there be? What possible grounds do you have for that? I tend to agree, yes, students will reach for copy and paste first, but that's because the teachers aren't being strict enough about what plagiarism is, and a lot of professors don't explain what plagiarism is to their students on the first day of class. It's not clearly spelled out in a lot of rules at universities, and the consequences aren't clearly spelled out. Here's another favorite. Most researchers must have been tempted at least a few times to copy sentences and images from other papers that appear on the internet while they were writing their papers. No. No. They must not have been. That's not, you don't get to take that step when you're making an argument. There must be, presumably, I think. No, you don't think. Yeah, it's an opinion paper. It's not a research article, but it's terrible argumentation. He goes on to say how easy it is to change images and modify images in papers. It's how many people out there, raise your hand if you are very proficient in Photoshop and can make a photo and can change a photo such that no one else will be able to recognize it. Come on, raise your hand. Don't be shy. Raise your hands. All right, 3. So, President, Professor, I'm not real clear on what his degree is. I know he's an economics professor emeritus from Kyoto University, but I couldn't find any documentation that he had gained his PhD. So we're going to go with professor. Although I should probably go with president because he is the president of a university. All right, fine. President Sawa. Anyway, President Sawa goes on to tell a quaint little anecdote about a professor at his school who has told him copy and paste tricks are most extensively used by students studying in Japan from other countries. Huh. That's interesting. One could say they're supplementing their insufficient command of the Japanese language. Or one could say they're cheating. Or one could say they're committing plagiarism. Or one could say perhaps that they're endangering their scholarship or enrollment. One could say that, and most extensively by... I wonder how many Japanese students that same professor teaches. Maybe not very many. So the next part of the paper goes on to talk about refereed journals and the referee system of rigorously selected experts who are asked to review each contributed paper to verify trustworthiness, novelty, and originality, and to make sure, main purpose is to make sure the paper is not crap. And then goes back on to talk about the stem cell paper and the fact that 2 world-famous stem cell experts from Riken as co-authors, and the revised versions were accepted for publication. So there's a ton of speculation in there. And the accusation that the 2 researchers were brought on just to get the paper through, that's not very nice, is it? And he admits, while I have no way of knowing who co-authored the stem cell papers submitted in February, those who wrote the revised versions included 2 well-known researchers of blah, blah, blah. Maybe they were on the first paper too and it got rejected. Because you say you don't have any way of knowing, and so that's a really nasty speculation that is unnecessary. Find out or don't say anything. Those are the 2 options. He goes on to make an actually very good point about the single-blind versus double-blind refereeing of papers submitted to journals. Academic journals all over the world work the same way. It's either a single-blind system or a double-blind system. The single-blind system means that the referee can see who wrote the paper, and the double-blind system means that neither the author nor the reviewer knows who wrote it. In the field of applied linguistics, I would say almost all the journals, I can't think of anybody that sends the paper out to be refereed with the author's name on it. But President Sawa does point to a presentation made by a Dr. Skipper, who is on the board for Nature, talking about the single-blind versus the double-blind referee system that Nature uses. And I haven't looked at that, but it probably would be worth looking up. My guess is Nature, if you do a single-blind system, why? You're a big enough journal to not have to do that. So don't. And he does go on to make a good point that possibly the name of the researcher could influence whether the referee will allow the paper into a journal or not. And it's definitely a valid point. But here's another favorite that kind of set me off. He is talking about the refereeing of the journals. And we could presume that the referee who denounced the February 2013 paper was intuitively correct in calling the paper's claims impossible. Intuitively correct. So you are to, let's skip a couple of lines and say, this means that an expert intuition is worthy of trust. Maybe, but I don't want my papers rejected because someone felt that it wasn't a good article. I want someone to be able to show that it wasn't a good article, or show where the methodology was wrong, or show where the underlying theory was wrong. Not just because they feel like, oh, my intuition says that this isn't right, and so I'm just going to reject it out of hand. No, it isn't right because of A, B, and C. Change this, change this, change this. All of these papers are subject to revisions every time. So President Sawa does go on to cast, in my opinion, an aspersion upon Albert Einstein. Even Albert Einstein rebuffed the uncertainty principle of quantum mechanics, saying he could not imagine God rolling dice. This shows that, like many other scientists, Einstein was unable at that point to free himself of the deterministic paradigm of classical mechanics. I don't know what to say about that. Does relativity count as classical mechanics? I'm pretty sure classical mechanics doesn't say anything about time slowing down or mass increasing as you approach the speed of light. Fairly sure that doesn't fall under classical mechanics. I'm not a physicist. But maybe you are, so please, in the comment section below. I think it was the final sentence in the paper that really set me off. Therefore, editors must possess an intuitive power that surpasses all others. No, not an intuitive power. Logical power, perhaps. They need to be able to recognize mistakes and problems with papers. You need to be able to determine whether a paper is appropriate for the journal that it's been submitted to. You need to make sure that when you read through the paper, there aren't gross errors, gross negligence. But intuition is a place to start in science. I have an intuition that this is correct or that is correct. Now I'm going to do an experiment to show it. That's how it works. President Sawa, the opinion paper that you submitted to the newspaper, has a ton of logical problems with it. And while I understand what you're shooting for, and I understand also that, native English isn't your native language, and perhaps in Japanese it would be a little bit more carefully written. Grammatically, it was fine. Logically, there were problems all over the place. A lot of suppositions that you don't show any support for. The support that you do show for some of the ideas that you had was anecdotal, and I understand that, publishing something like that in a newspaper, you are actually unable to point at the particular situation from which it comes, but the problem is you make it seem like some of these problems are widespread, and they're not. Plagiarism is an issue in Japan. It's an issue in the US. Students occasionally have to be reminded and occasionally punished because they commit plagiarism. Most schools, even in the US, they will, instead of a plagiarism strike against English as a second language student who submit papers that have plagiarized sections, they're given a warning and an opportunity to rewrite the section, but not all cases. Sometimes they don't even get the opportunity for a rewrite. When you submit plagiarized work, you fail. Because I can give stories too about students who have submitted plagiarized work. I'm not going to do it here. If you want to talk about it, that'd be great. Anyway, pretty much that's going to wrap it up. This has gone on forever. But I would like to extend one more time an offer to President Sawa of Shiga University. If you would like to discuss any of these issues that I've brought up with your publicly published article, I'll be happy to sit down and talk to you, and I would really like to sit down and talk to you on camera for it, because nobody would believe me anyway. And so let's hope I didn't shut a door on my career by making this video and editing it and putting it out. But people say things that aren't pretty well done. Don't you have to troll them a little bit at least? And with that, I'm going to go put my suit coat away. See ya!